February 9th, 1946. A cold morning in New York Harbor. A tall Italian man in his late 40s stood quietly on the deck of a ship. He wore a long coat and stared at the city skyline. This was the city that had made him powerful, rich, and feared. It was also the city that had sent him to prison for 50 years. His name was Charles "Lucky" Luciano. According to the law, this man was supposed to die behind bars. Instead, after only 10 years in prison, he was walking free, forced into exile, but alive, respected, and still powerful. How did this happen? How did America's most dangerous mafia boss earn freedom during the biggest war in human history? The answer lies in a secret wartime alliance that the U.S. government denied for decades, an alliance between the American military and the Mafia. Charles Luciano was born Salvatore Lucania in Sicily in 1907. In 1907, when he was just 9 years old, his family arrived in New York City. They settled in the Lower East Side, one of the poorest neighborhoods in America. The streets were crowded, dirty, and violent. Children worked instead of going to school. Crime was part of daily life. From the beginning, Luciano was different. He didn't want to live a normal, poor life. He learned fast. He fought back. As a teenager, he became involved in small crimes, stealing, mugging, running street scams. He quickly learned one important rule: power mattered more than fear. On the streets, Luciano met another young outsider, a small Polish-Jewish boy named Meyer Lansky. Luciano tried to bully him for protection money. Lansky refused and insulted him. Instead of attacking him, he laughed. He respected courage. That moment began one of the most powerful partnerships in criminal history. Luciano understood something other gangsters didn't. Crime wasn't just about violence. It was about organization, loyalty, and profit. While others fought over street corners, he thought bigger. In 1920, America made a huge mistake. Alcohol was banned. Prohibition turned ordinary citizens into criminals overnight. Demand for alcohol exploded. Someone had to supply it. Luciano stepped in. Bootlegging, illegal bars, nightclubs, gambling houses, prostitution, everything became money machines. Luciano expanded fast. He worked with Italians, Jews, and Irish criminals. He didn't care about ethnicity. He cared about results. By the late 1920s, Luciano controlled thousands of workers in illegal businesses. He became deeply involved in prostitution rings, gambling, and narcotics. He was suspected of murder, but never convicted. He stayed careful, smart. The old mafia bosses didn't like him. They believed in old traditions and constant warfare. Luciano believed war was bad for business.
In 1931, New York's mafia was tearing itself apart in a violent conflict known as the Castello-Morenze War. Luciano made his move. He arranged the murder of his own boss, Joe Masseria, during a restaurant meeting. While gunmen killed Masseria, Luciano calmly stepped away. Then he removed the next boss, Salvatore Maranzano. With both rivals dead, Luciano reshaped organized crime forever. He abolished the title of Boss of Bosses. Instead, he created the Commission, a governing body that divided power among mafia families. Disputes would be settled through discussion, not bloodshed. This was the birth of modern organized crime. By the early 1930s, Luciano controlled New York's criminal underworld. Gambling, prostitution, Drugs, dock unions, construction, protection rackets. He lived like royalty. Custom suits, luxurious hotels, private bodyguards. But success made him careless. New York's new mayor and law enforcement wanted to clean up the city. Special prosecutor Thomas E. Dewey made Luciano his main target. Dewey couldn't prove murder or bootlegging directly, so he attacked Luciano through prostitution charges. In 1936, women working in brothels were pressured to testify. Luciano was arrested. After a long trial, he was convicted on charges related to forced prostitution. He was sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison. Luciano was sent to Clinton Correctional Facility, nicknamed Little Siberia. Cold, isolated, brutal. For the first time in his life, Luciano had no power. His appeals failed. His influence seemed finished. Many believed he would die in prison. Then, history changed everything. December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The United States entered World War II. Suddenly, America faced enemies on multiple fronts. The Atlantic became a battlefield. German submarines were sinking American ships at terrifying speed. New York Harbor became the most important supply hub in the world. Weapons, food, fuel, and soldiers all passed through its docks. And those docks were controlled by the Mafia. The dock workers, unions, warehouses, everything answered to men loyal to Lucky Luciano. Even from prison, his authority remained absolute. Naval Intelligence suspected sabotage, fires, explosions, ships disappearing. The military feared German spies were hiding among dock workers. But there was a problem. The docks were a closed world. No one talked, no one cooperated. Government agents got nowhere. That's when the Navy made a decision it would later deny. They would talk to the Mafia. Officials first contacted Joseph Sachs Lanza, Luciano's lieutenant who controlled the Fulton fish market. Lanza made one thing clear: he wasn't the real boss. Lucky Luciano was. There was no avoiding it. In 1942, Navy intelligence officers, lawyers, and mob intermediaries traveled to Luciano's prison. The meeting was secret. No cameras, no official records. Luciano listened. He understood immediately. America needed him, and he needed America. Luciano agreed to help. Soon after, Luciano was transferred to a much easier prison. His living conditions improved. In return, the Mafia issued orders across New York's docks. No strikes, no sabotage, no fires, no cooperation with enemies. The results were immediate. Shipping attacks near New York stopped. The docks ran smoothly for the rest of the war. The U.S. government had made a deal with the devil, and it worked. But this was only the beginning. July 1943. The Mediterranean Sea was restless. Hundreds of Allied ships moved silently through the darkness, carrying soldiers, tanks, and supplies. Their target was the island of Sicily. This was not just another invasion. This was the key to breaking Nazi control in southern Europe. But before a single American soldier stepped onto Sicilian soil, something unusual had already happened. The invasion was prepared not only by generals and intelligence officers, but also by criminals, smugglers, and men who lived by a code older than any modern army. From a prison cell in New York, Lucky Luciano was still pulling strings. After the success of controlling the New York docks, American Naval Intelligence realized something important. Luciano didn't just control the docks, he controlled people, and not just in America. Luciano had been born in Sicily. He spoke the language. He understood the culture. More importantly, he had deep connections with Sicilian mafia families, men who had survived Mussolini's brutal war against organized crime. During the 1920s and 1930s, Italian dictator Benito Mussolini tried to destroy the mafia. He sent police and soldiers into villages, arrested thousands, and forced mafia bosses underground. Many fled, others were imprisoned. Some escaped to America with Luciano's help. By the time World War II began, the Mafia hated Mussolini as much as they hated the Nazis. This made Luciano extremely valuable. American intelligence needed local support in Sicily. Maps were outdated. Roads were poorly documented. Coastal defenses were unknown. Mines, gun placements, and German troop positions were a mystery. Traditional intelligence methods were failing. So once again, the U.S. government quietly turned to the underworld. Through Meyer Lansky and other intermediaries, Luciano was asked for help. Not officially, nothing was written, everything was spoken. Luciano agreed, but he wanted something in return. He wanted freedom. Not immediate release, but a clear promise. If he helped America win the war, his sentence would be reduced. From his prison cell, Luciano sent messages through trusted contacts. Sicilian immigrants were questioned. Fishermen, dock workers, smugglers, and former mafia members were brought in quietly. They were shown maps of Sicily and asked simple questions. Which beaches are safe? Which villages hate the fascists? Which roads can handle tanks? Who can be trusted? At first, many were afraid. Helping the Americans could mean death later. But then one name was mentioned: Lucky Luciano. That name changed everything. People talked. By mid-1943, American intelligence had a detailed picture of Sicily: coastal routes, harbor depths, local power structures, mafia families that could influence towns and villages. Some reports even suggested that mafia contacts were prepared to sabotage German supply lines and mislead Axis forces. Whether this happened officially remains debated, but one thing is clear: the American landing in western Sicily faced far less resistance than expected. When Allied forces landed, something strange happened. In many towns, Italian soldiers surrendered quickly. Some disappeared before fighting even began. In others, local guides appeared almost immediately, offering help. American officers later described how doors opened without force, how information flowed freely, how enemy positions were revealed with surprising accuracy. In one case, an American intelligence officer was led directly to a hidden Italian naval command post by a local man who seemed to know exactly where to go. Documents were captured, codebooks were seized, naval minefields were mapped. That man, it was later discovered, was a mafioso who owed his life to Luciano. The invasion of Sicily was a success. Within weeks, the island was under Allied control. Official reports credited military planning and air superiority, but behind the scenes, many officers knew the truth. The Mafia had helped. After the invasion, a new problem appeared. Sicily was broken. Fascist officials had fled. Towns were leaderless. Crime and hunger spread quickly. The Allied military government had to restore order fast. And once again, they turned to familiar faces. Local mafia leaders were appointed as mayors and administrators. They were anti-fascist. They had local support. They knew how to control people. To the Americans, they seemed like the best option. This decision would have consequences for decades. The Mafia returned to power in Sicily, stronger than ever. While all this happened overseas, Luciano waited patiently. He had delivered results. The docks were secure. The invasion succeeded. The Mafia cooperated. Now it was America's turn to keep its promise. In 1945, the war began to end. Germany surrendered. Japan would soon follow. The world celebrated victory. Quietly, behind closed doors, discussions began about Lucky Luciano. Officially, he was still a convicted criminal serving a long sentence. Publicly freeing him would cause outrage, so a compromise was reached. Luciano would be released early, but deported. He would never be allowed to return to the United States. On February 9, 1946, exactly 4 years after the secret prison meetings, Lucky Luciano walked free. He boarded a ship bound for Italy. No apology, no public explanation, no medals. But he was alive, and in his world, that meant victory. Luciano settled first in Italy, then moved to Cuba. From there, he rebuilt his empire. International drug routes, gambling networks, mafia alliances across continents. The modern mafia survived because of systems he had created decades earlier. In 1962, Lucky Luciano died of a heart attack at an airport in Naples. He was 64 years old, a free man. The U.S. government never officially admitted the deal, but documents, testimonies, and results tell a different story. America won the war, and Lucky Luciano won his freedom. After the war, the world moved forward, but the consequences of secret decisions stayed hidden in the shadows. Lucky Luciano was no longer behind prison bars, yet he was never truly out of the game. His deportation from the United States did not end his power. It only changed its shape. When Luciano arrived in Italy in 1946, he was greeted like a legend. Many people in Sicily already knew what he had done during the war. To them, he was not a criminal who had betrayed America. He was a man who had beaten Mussolini, survived the prison system, and returned home stronger than ever. Italy, after the war, was broken. Cities were damaged, the economy was weak, and law enforcement was fragile. This chaos created the perfect environment for organized crime to grow again. The Mafia stepped into places where the government could not function. They provided jobs, protection, food, and order at a price. Luciano quickly became the bridge between American crime families and the old Sicilian Mafia. Even though he was officially banned from the United States, his influence there never disappeared. Messages traveled through trusted men. Orders were passed quietly. Money flowed across borders. Soon after arriving in Italy, Luciano secretly traveled to Cuba. Havana at the time was becoming a playground for gangsters. Casinos, hotels, nightclubs, and drug routes all passed through the island. From Cuba, Luciano coordinated meetings with American mafia leaders. These meetings helped shape global organized crime for decades. One of the biggest businesses was narcotics. Heroin routes were established from the Middle East and Europe into the United States. Sicily became a key transit point. The systems Luciano had created before his arrest made it easy. The Mafia now operated like a multinational corporation. Meanwhile, in America, law enforcement slowly began to realize what had happened during the war. Rumors circulated, journalists asked questions. Former intelligence officers spoke quietly off the record, but no one wanted to admit the truth publicly. The idea that the U.S. government had worked with the Mafia was uncomfortable. It challenged the image of moral victory, so the story was buried. In 1954, an official investigation quietly reviewed intelligence operations. The report did not name Luciano directly in its conclusions, but it confirmed something important. During wartime, intelligence agencies had used any and all means necessary, including criminals, to protect national security. This was the closest the government ever came to admitting the deal. By the late 1950s, the Mafia had become more powerful than ever. Labor unions, construction, Ports, casinos, drugs, and gambling were all deeply influenced by organized crime. Many of these systems traced their structure back to Luciano's ideas. Ironically, the man who had helped stabilize organized crime now watched as violence returned. New bosses fought for power. Younger gangsters ignored the old rules. The commission he had created was no longer respected the way it once was. Luciano himself lived quietly in Italy during his final years. His health declined. His power remained, but he no longer controlled everything. Still, visitors came from around the world to seek advice or pay respect. In 1962, while waiting for a flight at Naples Airport, Lucky Luciano collapsed. He died from a heart attack before reaching the hospital. No gunshots, no prison cell, no execution, just a sudden end. His body was later returned to New York for burial, despite the ban that had once kept him out of the country. Even in death, rules were bent for him. Lucky Luciano left behind a complicated legacy. To some, he was a criminal who destroyed lives, fueled addiction, and spread corruption. To others, he was a genius who modernized organized crime and understood power better than most politicians. And to a few, he was a wartime asset who helped protect America when it was most vulnerable. The truth is uncomfortable. America won World War II through courage, sacrifice, and strength, but also through secret deals, moral compromises, and alliances with men like Lucky Luciano. History rarely offers clean victories. Luciano proved that power does not always come from uniforms or medals. Sometimes it comes from control, influence, and knowing exactly when the world needs you. In the end, Lucky Luciano did not just survive the system, he used it. And that is why his story still matters today.